It's Writer's Dream time again. I'm Linda Maria Frank, and I hope that you've been enjoying our conversations with authors who talk about how they write their books, how they publish them, and how they market them. You can find us on YouTube, just look for The Writer's Dream, and you can find us on our Facebook page, which is also called The Writer's Dream. If you are an author or have anything to do with the book industry and would like to be on the show, please message me through that Facebook page, and I will get back to you and we can schedule you on a show. Today's guest is Jehn. George has written a very interesting book, and he has a very interesting story about his book. His book is Final Destination Disaster. So George, tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Well, I was a pilot for Eastern Airlines, which is what the book is about, the demise of Eastern Airlines. I flew for them for approximately 18 years. I was one of the heads of the pilots union in New York for 6 years. I was a member of the Pilot System Board of Adjustment, which is the judicial body that adjudicates grievances for the Eastern pilots. And I was also the sole pilot member of the Eastern Employee Involvement Committee, aside from flying for 18 years also.
You're a busy guy.
I was.
So would you say that you have a kind of an inside look at the aviation industry?
Definitely. Well, when I left Eastern in '88 before the strike, and I went to work for another large airline. I flew out my career there and then retired, I hate to say it, 10 years ago, mandatory retirement, and took up writing full time.
Do you still fly?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I figured I cheated death for
yes.
40 years, so no sense. I go fishing now instead.
Yeah, there's so many small plane crashes now.
Seems
There was just one in Blue Point the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It does seem to be, they say it's safer than driving a car, but I don't know.
Well, it is. I mean, in 40 years, I never had a problem.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So when you started writing, what did you do? What kind of writing did you do?
Well, I started off probably in the late 70s, early 80s. I wrote some articles for Newsday, or had a couple of full-page stories on the aviation industry then, on deregulation when it first surfaced. I've always done a lot of writing for fishing magazines, like The Fisherman, Saltwater Sportsman, and Sport Fishing Magazine. And when what happened at Eastern, what precipitated the book at Eastern was the day before the airline was sold to Texas Air, Frank Lorenzo's Texas Air. I held a meeting with another union representative, Skip Copeland, and the then CEO of Eastern, Frank Borman, the former astronaut. And we offered him a deal which included capitulation by all the unions, including the IAM, that was worth approximately $2 billion over a 5-year period of time, and he turned us down. So I figured when otherwise rational people do irrational things, there must be something much larger at stake. So I began at that meeting and worked backwards, and that's what took me to places I never imagined it would, and that's what created the basis for the book.
So do you like writing fiction better or nonfiction?
I don't know. It's a good question. My first book was a novel, and I really enjoyed writing it because it was a lot of fun. Obviously, for obvious reasons, this book wasn't that much fun. I wrote it for the 40,000 former Eastern employees so that perhaps they would know what destroyed their lives. I mean, there were countless divorces. There were people who lost their homes. There were, kids who were taken out of school. There were suicides. So that was my main driving force for writing this book, was for the former Eastern employees. But as I got into it, I found out that it really impacted everyone who's ever boarded a commercial airliner flight, because the trust that you place in both the heads of the airlines and the government agencies, it didn't exist in this particular case.
Wow. So would you say that the people who were flying at that time, it was dangerous for them?
People who were flying to certain locations, it was. One location in particular, it was very dangerous. And as the union representative at the time, I received a lot of reports from the Eastern pilots about how unsafe the operation was. I'm speaking about South America.
Yeah. I get, what was it, that they didn't have mechanics who were up to snuff to maintain the planes and turn them around?
That really wasn't it. It was mainly the systems down there were antiquated compared to what they are in the United States. The pilots had no specialized training when they first started flying down there. It was like a throwback to the 1950s. And there were a lot of safety issues that were neglected or were just cast aside and never even looked at down there by, not only by top management, but by the FAA also.
All right, so once you put the book together, I'm assuming that because of the nature of the book, did you have to deal with legal issues? Did you have to get a lawyer?
Well, I did have an attorney, a good friend of mine, Andrew Maloney, who was a former U.S. attorney, assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. He read it over. It's a nonfiction memoir. The characters who are in it are public figures, so the standard then is much higher that's applied. But no, I'm not worried about that at all, because obviously the truth is the ultimate vindication.
Okay. All right. I wondered how that worked. I really, wasn't sure, because I write fiction, and when I'm writing fiction and I put real people in the book, I wonder, when you're putting real things into fiction, I wonder how that works. But my books are always vetted by the publisher anyway, so I'm assuming if there was a problem, right?
Well, there is a new Eastern Airlines that began flying several months ago, and the book in no way, shape, or form reflects on a new Eastern. Mm-hmm. I wish them the best of luck. They deserve it. There are good people at the helm. Like I said, I hope they're very successful.
So, in light of what you know about your experience then, how do you feel about airlines today? No, really. I mean, is it safe to fly? Is all this business of us taking our shoes off and going through security, is that helping anything?
Well, I don't believe that they've ever caught many terrorists or any terrorists.
Yeah, they had the shoe bomber, right?
Yeah.
No, they caught him on the plane.
Yeah, right. But there were, I think there are other issues that are out there today with the automation that's there. They're having trouble getting experienced pilots to man the cockpits. So when all the experienced pilots retire, now all you have are the pilots who are grown up with or lived on automation for their entire career, which is quite a bit different than...
You mean flying the plane on autopilot? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, today that's the way everything is done.
Okay. Oh.
Not too much hand flying anymore.
Please, I'm flying in 2 weeks.
Well, no, I mean, the safety record is excellent.
Yeah.
Because I think right now what you've got is the best of both worlds. You've still got the old school pilots like myself who grew up hand flying the jets, but in the right seat, in the co-pilot seat, and some in the captain's seat are the pilots who grew up with the automation. So I think perhaps down the road that's going to create some problems. And also the fact when I started flying for Eastern, there were 3 pilots in the cockpit, captain, co-pilot, and flight engineer. Today, on every airplane that's built, there's only 2, meaning that a new pilot starts off in the right seat, the co-pilot seat. So you don't get that opportunity to watch what the other guys are doing for a year or so before you move up to the co-pilot seat, which is, I think there's a big learning curve there.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear what you're saying, simply because we have a big military, and there is a lot of flying done in the military now because of all the military actions we're involved with, that I would assume that those people would naturally go into commercial flying after they get out of the service.
Not so much anymore. If you think about it, every major airline has declared bankruptcy. And when they've done it, Chapter 11 bankruptcy, they've terminated their pilot pensions. The pay.
So why do it?
The pay has gone down, exactly. So for a military pilot, it pays for them to stay in the military rather than what used to happen would be they'd put their time in, then come out and go fly for a major airline because the pay and working conditions were excellent, which is no longer the case.
So basically what you, and I don't want to give away too much of the book, but what what you discovered and what you knew actually when you were working there and working with the union is it's pretty much mismanagement.
I don't want to classify it as that because in a lot of respects the management was good. It was the book is related to one event in particular that no one ever wanted to look at, including the top management of Eastern Airlines, including the FAA, and including the National Transportation Safety Board, which, as you know, is the government investigative
Right.
agency that looks at crashes.
Right.
There was a crash that took place on January 1st, 1985, outside of La Paz, Bolivia, on Mount Iamani, of an Eastern 727, Eastern Flight 980, which is the only crash in the history of the National Transportation Safety Board that's never been properly investigated in a timely manner. And that's basically where my search led me back to, is to Eastern Airlines.
So you wanted to know why they didn't investigate it.
Right.
What were they hiding? Yeah. Oh,
It's all in the book.
yes, I don't want to give the book away. So you have a traditional publisher.
Yes, I do. Changing Lives Press is the name of the publisher.
Okay, and you have an agent?
No, I don't. In fact, that's an interesting story because Francesca Minerva first approached me about this book as an agent, and I wasn't quite ready at the time, and I kind of put her off. In the meanwhile, I completed the book, and I had another independent publisher from the Midwest who wanted to purchase the book. And then 3 weeks before it was due to go to press, he called me up and said, I haven't made any money in 9 years. My wife is driving me crazy, so I'm going to close my doors. I said, oh, what am I going to do now? I have to go out and find an agent, start all over again. And approximately 3 days later, I got an email from Francesca, and she told me that she now owned a publishing house, Changing Lives Press. She said, what did you ever do with that Easton story? I could never put it out of my mind.
Wow.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
You know, we quibbled back and forth just a little bit about, you know, the details and the money and the monetary end of it. Not much. She's a good lady. And the rest is history. It came out a little bit over a year ago, a year and a half ago, approximately.
Yeah. I always have I'm in a quandary about what to do about agents and publishing. I've had people tell me that it's impossible to find an agent. Agents only want things that they believe can be successful projects, which I think, the general opinion is that nonfiction sells. It's easier to sell nonfiction than it is fiction.
I think that's probably correct.
And if you go to a bookstore, of course, you can believe that because a lot of what you're looking at that's popular is fiction. And so you're competing with Patterson and J.K. Rowling and all those people. And I just never, I guess because I got into writing pretty late in life, like you. After retirement, I decided to write, and I said, I don't have time to wait to have somebody discover me, and so I went into self-publishing. And that's been an interesting experience, actually, but some doors are still closed.
I was never interested in self-publishing. As a matter of fact, when I first completed this book in 1991, the Eastern Airlines book, I called up a publisher, an independent publisher in Manhattan, W.W. Norton, and I got one of the editors on the line, and I told him who I was and what I had. And I said, would you be interested? He said, well, we very well might be, but he said, you have to get yourself an agent. And I said, well, I didn't know anything about it. And I said, well, do you have one that I could contact? And he said, yes, I'll give you the best one in the industry. He said, he probably won't represent you, but he might know somebody who would. And he gave me the gentleman's name. And I have this as part of the story toward the end of this book. And so I called him up, and his name was Robert Dukas. And I got him on the line, and we spoke. And he said, he was an Englishman. He's since passed away. And he said, he was a little bit standoffish. He said, well, this was before the internet was large. You couldn't send files or anything. He said, well, send me a copy of your manuscript. So being a cheap airline pilot at the time, we could send things at FedEx for $5. So I FedExed him the manuscript, and I'll never forget, it was on a Thursday. And Monday morning, my phone rang, and it was Robert Dukas. And I said, I figured he was calling to let me know he got the manuscript. I said, did you get the manuscript? And he said, oh, yes. He said, I read it. I said, you read it? He goes, yeah, could we get together for dinner tonight?
Wow.
So I met him for dinner that night. We signed a contract, and he said, we're both going to make millions on this book. And as it turns out, I explained in the book now why that didn't work out, but it didn't. And so I put the book off after hearing what he had told me. I put the book off after speaking to my wife about it, but it's out now. So.
Okay, and one of the, I guess, most exciting things for this story that you just told is very exciting to people who are listening, who are authors or just writers who wish to get into the business, because what you did is you contacted the publisher first, and then through them, because you got somebody who was helpful, found an agent. And that's the big, people who don't want to self-publish, that's the big thing. How do I find an agent? How do I find a publisher? And one of the ways you can do that, of course, is to find a book in your genre, several of them. Go to the library, go to a bookstore, and look at the acknowledgments in the front. And most authors acknowledge their agents.
Right.
So, and then you go on the internet, and now everything's on the internet, and they'll give you submission guidelines and whatnot.
Right.
So, which is an important thing for people to know. But as I started to say before, the next really exciting thing about all the hard work that you put into this book is now you've sold the movie rights.
That's correct. Well, actually, I
How
didn't
does that
sell
work?
them. Francesca sold the movie rights.
Yeah.
Being a former agent, she still had a lot of contacts in the movie industry. So she approached a gentleman by the name of Rob DeFranco, who owns Dragon River Productions, and she sent him actually 3 or 4 books in her stable of authors, so to speak. There's some pretty famous people, not like me, and she sent him either 3 or 4 books.
It's going to happen.
Pardon?
It's going to happen.
Well,
You're
I
gonna
hope
be
you're right.
famous.
But anyway, she sent him 3 or 4 books, a couple of which were written by famous individuals, and Rob chose this book to produce a movie from it.
No, that's great. And as you said, we were talking before that the next thing is you have to find somebody to finance it.
Well, not me.
No, I
that's
know.
out
Yeah,
of my hands.
it's out of your
Right.
hands now.
I believe that's
that's
what.
exciting.
Pardon?
That's exciting.
Oh, it's very. It's
mean,
every author's dream.
Absolutely, that's the ultimate dream. I write a mystery series for kids. They're like Nancy Drew, and I would love for somebody to find them a home on TV as a serialized kind of program.
That would be great. Yeah.
And I love PBS. I love mystery and Masterpiece and whatnot. And I look at it and I say, PBS has a lot of stuff for little kids and a lot of stuff for adults. But those middle ages, that 10 to whatever, 15, which is who I write for. So I keep saying, Linda, you have to write a letter. You really have to come up with that elevator pitch and write that letter and
There you
get
go.
out
That's
there.
all it's funny. Fate works in funny ways sometimes.
It does.
I'm working on another book right now. I'm almost completed with it. It's basically about that, and it's when I
Being
look,
in the right place at the right time.
when I look back on my life, it was from that. I don't want to get too much into it, but I had a near-death experience in 1984 as a result of a car crash.
Oish.
And it really...
See? It's what I said. Cars are much more dangerous.
You're right. But, as a result of that, it opened up a lot of questions in my mind about life and what it might be all about and things like that. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that when we get to that post-retirement, whatever era of our lives, we start to think about that? What's...
Well, I thought about it a lot before then while I was, still working, and it was, it's very, very interesting, very interesting. In fact, I was on CNBC with Dr. Ray Moody, who's the father of the near-death experience, and I was invited to go on there, and the only reason I went was because he was there, and I got to sit in the green room with him for, an hour just to pick his brain about it.
Yeah. No, that must be... So I have no